Hi, I'm Greta Bhatia Villagran. I'm the CEO and founder of Pinary.
Welcome here in Waldorf in our headquarters, and my name is Volker Mohr. I'm taking care for the product management of SAP Global Trade Services, which are two products, to be more precisely, the old SAP GTS and the new SAP GTS Edition for SAP HANA. And I'm looking forward to dig a little bit deeper into these questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy. I really value this time that you're spending with me today. So there's a lot of confusion in the market about GTS Edition for HANA. So let's clarify, is GTS Edition for HANA an upgrade to GTS 11, or is it considered a new product?
Yeah, so I think if I take a little bit the bigger context, then I think we have to put it into context of the bigger SAP strategy, and that goes back more than 10 years in 2013, when SAP basically made the decision to introduce in-memory technology, and we branded that SAP HANA. And what came after that right away was to say the next generation of business application will be built on in-memory technology, meaning SAP HANA. Yeah? And you've probably followed that direction in the space of ERP. From ERP to S4HANA. So S4HANA is basically this new generation of products built on in-memory technology. Yeah? And we have taken the same steps in Global Trade Services. Yeah? So Global Trade Service was always a separate product built on SAP technology. So that means for the GTS 11, it is running on the classical SAP NetWeaver technology, either SAP NetWeaver 740 or SAP NetWeaver 750. And now we have done pretty much the same steps that you have probably followed in the ERP space from ERP to S4. We have taken the separate product, the classical GTS, to GTS Edition for SAP HANA. And very similar steps happened. Yeah? So first of all, we put it on in-memory technology, so SAP HANA only. Yeah? So not any database anymore, but rather focused and also optimized for SAP HANA, for the in-memory technology of SAP. And then also the same paradigms, like, for example, unifying the user interface using SAP Fiori, just the same way SAP S4HANA does. Yeah? But I think it's important to understand that we are really talking about 4 different products. Yeah? We are talking about the classical ERP and the different releases. We are talking about S4HANA as the new product in that space. We're talking about the old GTS, and we're talking about the GTS Edition for SAP HANA. So now to elaborate a little bit more on the question, how difficult is it to get from GTS 11, which is the last product that we have in mainstream maintenance for the old GTS product, how difficult is it to get to the new product, which is called GTS Edition for SAP HANA? The answer is really, it depends. Yeah. So you can imagine it's not completely new in any aspect. Yeah. But you have to go to HANA. That's the first important thing. You have to go to Fiori, the new usability. And that turned out to be not such a big problem as many people think. Yeah, it's much easier for the business departments than they fear in the first attempt, right? And then it depends very much in what area we're talking about. Yeah, so it can be anything from pretty common or pretty close to a usual release upgrade that you were used to from the older versions, GTS 10 to 11 and so on. It can also mean a little bit more work because we have also taken the freedom, since it's a new product, to redesign some of the business processes, in particular in the area of preference management. So I think it's up to the individual implementation projects to really figure out what is used, yeah, and what is different to the GTS 11, and can be anything from a usual release upgrade to a little bit more work.
Thank you for clarifying that, because there's this, you can say, a thought in the market that, well, if SAP GTS Edition for HANA is a new product, then some companies are thinking, should we take this opportunity to look at other non-SAP global trade software rather than implementing a new product by SAP? So I'm glad you clarified this, because although it is termed as a new, not an upgrade, a core upgrade, but a lot of core functionalities are still the same with the enhancements. So my understanding is that SAP has taken 11 and we're using the in-memory HANA for performance reasons, but also you have enhanced some of the existing functionalities. I understand some of the tables have been consolidated to make it easier for the users. So the company should not think that it's a brand new product and now things are going to be different in GTS. Most of it is still the same, with the exception of enhancement and making it better what we have. what we already have, just making it into a better product. There's no need to actually think that we need to now look at another software because Edition for HANA is a new product, because it's not.
Yeah, so if you look at that and compare it, the two options that you have, that would mean basically introducing a completely new software that you don't know, that you need to get familiar with, that you need to integrate with all of your ERP processes. And most of our customers are running one or multiple SAP ERP systems, and in many cases also combinations, old ERP systems, classical ECC customers, new S4 systems, in some instances also cloud systems get into the mix more and more, private and public cloud, And I think that is a key difference with GTS. So it's coming from the old GTS. So we're very familiar with it. And also you have all of the integration points to the classical ECC systems, but also to the new S4 systems, And being a separate product, that gives you, of course, also the total flexibility to manage that separately from your bigger S4 transformations, So we have all kind of mixes in our customer base, Customers that have chosen to first do the GTS upgrade, going from the GTS to GTS Edition for HANA, but still keeping the old ECC systems in place. We have the integration points out of the standard or in the standard there. And we have other combinations where customers are already on S4 and operate the old GTS, then also connected to S4. So we have all flexibility to separate and run these upgrade projects in a separate fashion and build your roadmaps as it fits. So certainly the S4HANA transformations are much bigger than GTS.
Yes.
So it's important to be able to separate that.
Correct. And it's also, I think, important to point out that with GTS Edition for HANA, like you mentioned earlier, there are integration points with S4. So companies do not need to build an interface. It's a plugin in S4 for GTS Edition for HANA. Are there any big changes to the plugin in S4 HANA for GTS, or the plugin is still the same that we had in GTS 11?
Yeah, fundamentally works the same way.
It works the same way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we have this integration. I mean, that's the strength of GTS from the very beginning, 25 years ago when we started. We purposely made it a separate system, but it can be integrated, or it is seamlessly integrated with all of the logistics and sales process that we have in the ERP space, or in the S4 space now with a new product on that end. And that continues to be the same with Edition for HANA. But also the integration back into the ECC box. As I mentioned, you can also continue to run your ECC box and integrate into the new Edition for HANA and separate the upgrade to the S4 box with ECC with that.
True.
So you're not tied to that. You can completely decouple the project.
Now, the other thought process that some companies approach us with is that if a lot of the functionalities are the same between GTS and GTS Edition for HANA, then what is the benefit of migrating to Edition for HANA, besides the fact that SAP is ending the support at the end of this year? Besides that fact, what are the, and again, I'm going to be very candid here, because some of the companies say that they feel that they're being forced to migrate by the end of this year. And they're okay with migrating, but they want to understand, what are the benefits? What do they get by migrating to Edition for HANA that they do not currently have with GTS 11?
Yeah, and I mean, the question is, what is different between the Edition for HANA and the old GTS version? So that is, of course, a very individual question depending on what you're using. So I think a key point there is certainly the old GTS is running on a technology basis, and the new Edition for SAP HANA is running on the latest technology basis. So the SAP S4HANA Foundation, which is also in sync with our flagship product in that space, S4HANA. And so if you're going to Edition for HANA, you are in the same safe mainstream until 2040, also in terms of new innovations, that we only bring with the Edition for HANA. So the first Edition for HANA release we brought out in 2020. And now we have 2023 as the go-to release for all of our customers. This product definitely has a roadmap of new innovations. The next version planned for end of this year, and then continuing in sync with the S4HANA strategy every 2 years, a new release. So we'll bring new innovations. So that's an important point. Whereas the old GTS 11, of course, does not have a roadmap since 2020. So this is more or less frozen. We don't continue with that. Yeah? Then we have done a couple of redesigns, so really improve the business functionality, in the area of preference management, for example, and we're going to do more investments also on the whole topic of origin management, and the first steps in that direction are already planned with the next release, the 2025 release. But I think the main reason for me would be to say, okay, I'm basically in the full mainstream of the SAP strategy, and I'm on a safe path there and will be a smooth path forward in terms of the legal updates, of course, that we don't bring, as of next year, anymore down to GTS 11. That's an important point, of course, for some customers, but the more important thing is to be on a safe path in sync with the SAP mainstream, with S4HANA and so on.
So the other message that I think it's important for customers or potential customers to understand is that if they're an SAP shop, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if they have an SAP ERP system, then having SAP GTS Edition for HANA, migrating to that versus a non-SAP system will be beneficial for them because it's they're integrating with SAP, they're staying in the SAP environment, in the SAP ecosystem. Whereas in my experience, I have seen that companies that create interfaces with non-SAP systems, they work, yes. But in the long run, it's higher maintenance cost because of the interface maintenance, especially when it comes to upgrade. And you just mentioned, I believe I heard it, that the service packs that you're going to have for S4 and Edition for HANA, they're going to be synchronized. So
not necessarily the service packs, but the end of mainstream maintenance.
Okay.
And we have synchronized that as of the release 2023.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And that will help companies as well.
So that means you can compare it to S4HANA 2023 as an end of mainstream maintenance 2030. And then the next release is S4HANA 2025, S4HANA Foundation 2025, GTS Edition for HANA 2025 will have an end of mainstream maintenance 2032. And then continuing this release and maintenance strategy, basically following the S4HANA.
Okay. Another question that companies ask us quite a bit is if they don't have the resources or the budget to move to Edition for HANA by the end of this year, when the support ends. However, they are interested in moving, but they just can't do that this year. If they're utilizing only compliance management in GTS, could there be any negative impact if they don't move to Edition for HANA this year, rather wait till next year? If they're not using customs, would it be okay for them to wait? Or is there still a risk if they don't move this year?
So I think that comes back to the question, what will happen in 2026 with GTS 11, right? So technically what will happen is that GTS 11 is moving into the next maintenance phase. So we have end of mainstream maintenance in December 2025. That means as of 2026, and the product version GTS 11 specifically will be in customer-specific maintenance, which is the same thing that is already true for the older GTS releases. And we have still a lot of customers that are already in customer-specific maintenance today. So now if you ask an SAP product manager what the recommendation is of course always latest product version, latest service pack. But the reality is we have already quite a number of customers on older GTS releases who seem to have not a big issue with it. But at the end of the day, you have to have an individual investigation what it means for you. And to give you a couple of hints what to look at. First of all, there is a note detailing very much in detail what customer-specific maintenance means compared to mainstream maintenance. So that's something to clearly understand, and then also to understand clearly how you're using the solution. And there are a couple of areas in the solution that are more risky from the perspective of legal changes. So one of the important things is we are not downporting legal changes anymore. And so that means especially if you're operating the system in these areas, which is customs management, which is intrastat, and these kind of things, then would be very important to understand what you're using there. And if there's anything on the horizon from a regulatory perspective, that could get you in trouble. But reversely, that also means many customers will not have immediately a problem in 2026 because either there is nothing on the agenda of the regulators or they're not using any capabilities that are usually subjected to a lot of legal changes in that area. And So I can just tell you, I mean, it's not my recommendation. Recommendation from SAP is always latest product version, latest service pack, of course, yeah. But we have customers that have purposely made a decision because they came to the conclusion for themselves they can manage the risk that comes with customer-specific maintenance to postpone the implementation and transition projects to 2026, also to avoid a little bit the bottlenecks as far as the consulting resources in the market are concerned.
Yeah, thank you. And I know I've asked you this question many times, but I will ask again. Customers ask, will SAP extend the date of this GTS 11 support, which is ending in this year? Will SAP extend the date?
Yeah, so forward-looking statements are always subject to change, of course, but for me, very clearly, there are no plans to do that. And I can also give you a little bit of the motivation why. So if we would do it, we would have 4 product versions in parallel in mainstream maintenance, with all of the legal changes needed to be downported in time and released in time. Yeah. So from that perspective, I think we will not see any extension of the mainstream maintenance for GTS 11 beyond 2025. Yeah.
Yeah, when you put it that way, it's a lot of work to maintain all 4. Yes.
Yeah, and it's also a risk for us and for the whole customer base. Yeah, we have to say that very clearly because these legal changes come with a defined deadline from an external regulator, and we have to make sure that all releases and product versions that are in mainstream maintenance get these updates in time and leave enough time for the implementation projects and the customers to adopt that. Yeah. And I think the risk for us and the complete customer base would be simply too big to say, instead of 2, which are subsequent releases, we do it for 4, and then with the upcoming new releases, there will be another one added every 2 years or so. Yeah. So we'll not do that. Yeah.
Yes. Another big elephant in the room that customers bring up all the time is there any recommendation or any tips from SAP as to which migration type strategy should they choose when it comes to migrating to Edition for HANA, GTS Edition for HANA, such as greenfield, brownfield, or bluefield, which is rarely mentioned? Are there any tips where a customer can look at these strategies and say, this is what works for me better, or this is what SAP recommends, that at least a guideline as to which path they should look at, or how should they even determine what is the right path for them?
Yeah, to be honest, that's a little bit beyond the typical things that a product manager deals with. It's more an implementation related question, and certainly a very independent or individual question. And from the perspective of what I see, of course, that we see a lot of brownfield approaches, yeah, especially for customers that don't want to make big changes at the same time. Yeah?
Correct.
And then I would say it's something that needs to be analyzed on an individual basis. What's the best approach there, or together with the implementation partner? But I think all scenarios are commonly used. Yeah.
Okay. There's another question that comes up quite a bit, and that is, can companies use Fiori apps and GTS area menu at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the question whether you can still use the old usability is, I think, mostly coming up because the business is a little bit concerned about a change. Yeah, and what we found out, actually talked to a lot of implementation partners and customers as well. Yeah, the switch from the old usability to SAP Fiori is actually not such a big deal. Yeah. Because first of all, the things that you are familiar with, the transactions and everything that you were familiar with in the old GTS, you know the business, it's displayed a little bit differently, yeah, but you get familiar with it very quickly. Yeah. And then we have to say the new apps that we have built are of course not available at all. Yeah, so you have to deal with SAP Fiori. Yeah, and our recommendation would be also you might find some technical things still in the system. Yeah, our recommendation would be to really make the switch to SAP Fiori because we're not going to develop the old usability moving forward. And I can also not guarantee that everything that worked in the old one, if you find something, is still probably working in the future. Yeah, so from that perspective, really make yourself familiar with SAP Fiori. It's a much smaller step than everybody thinks.
Okay, that's great. And then the last topic I would like to touch upon is, again, big confusion on this one is co-deployment. What is co-deployment, and why should a customer or a company choose co-deployment versus standalone?
So I think that refers a little bit back to our very first question where we said GTS is and always was a completely separate product. Yeah. The old GTS on NetWeaver, the new one on SAP S4HANA Foundation. Yeah. And you could implement it, run it on a separate box, and then or integrate it with S4 or ERP or whatever you wanted to do. And we got the demand from the market that they said, can we also deploy a GTS edition for HANA on an S4HANA foundation and the underlying infrastructure that is shared with S4HANA, with our S4HANA box. Yeah.
So they need only one HANA database for both?
Exactly, yeah. And the whole layers below the actual application layer are shared with S4HANA. And that is possible since the edition for HANA 2023, which is the current one. We had to eliminate some conflicts in the data models between GTS and S4HANA to enable it. Yeah. And it essentially means that the co-deployment option would be co-deployed on the same underlying S4HANA foundation and infrastructure stack as an S4HANA system. Yeah? But technically, it's exactly the same software. Yeah? Mm-hmm. So in terms of implementation effort, there's no difference. Yeah? In terms of the integration, there is no difference. In terms of the architectural models you could run, yeah, there's no difference. Yeah, you could also put a co-deployment system in the middle and then center a lot of different other ERP systems around it. The GTS edition for HANA would be installed in a separate client. Yeah, so it's not directly embedded in the clients of your S4HANA process and so on. And so from that perspective, the key difference is you're sharing the underlying infrastructure. And that can be a benefit, yeah, of more effectively using the infrastructure that you have from your S4HANA anyway. And the disadvantage that you need to keep in mind, of course, is you have a dependency there, yeah. So that means you need to somehow keep in mind the release upgrades for S4HANA and GTS in sync, yeah, and so on and so on. And that is also the reason why, since the release edition for HANA 2023, we have tried to synchronize the end of mainstream maintenance dates of the GTS release and the corresponding S4HANA Foundation and S4HANA releases to eliminate or to reduce these dependencies as much as possible. But still, the administration side is something you need to keep in mind. And it depends a little bit on how up-to-date you want to be with your S4HANA box. Yeah? So my point of reference would be if you plan to keep your S4HANA box on the latest status anyway, yeah? And that is something that you most likely want to do, or most of our customers would want to do with GTS because of the legal changes and so on. And I think co-deployment is not a big issue, yeah. But if you plan to not touch your S4HANA box or touch it as little as possible, yeah, and then keep your GTS box up to date with every service pack and stuff like that, these are things that are not fitting well together, yeah. But other than that, it's mostly the trade-off between more effectively using the infrastructure by sharing it compared to the dependencies that you create, yeah, and the additional aspects that you need to manage by having S4 and GTS together. Yeah.
Although companies do perform sizing prior to implementation, yeah, I think it behooves to kind of bring that up, that if they're using one database, that companies may need a bigger server, yeah, because if they have one database for both S4 and GTS, yeah. It's just to kind of put that out there, that if the companies are doing that to save cost on the co-deployment, they should also look at the cost of the size of the database that they will need. Yeah, so that's clear. If you're sharing it, you need to size it for everything that you run on it. Yeah, that means also the S4 process that you want to run. Yeah, and I would say in the extreme case, that could mean you have almost nothing in S4. Yeah, then the difference is not so big to a standalone, where the GTS would bring the infrastructure. And if you're running a lot of S4 process, then of course that adds up. Yeah. Thank you.